The Marvels is the kill shot to the MCU, the final blow, the coup de grace. This movie has come to give mercy to the dying MCU by attempting to finish it off for good. Before I go into my numerous and plentiful criticisms and gripes with this movie, like always, if you enjoy the movie, that's fine. Don't let my review stop you from doing that. But I very much did not enjoy my Marvels experience, and I'm gonna outline exactly why that is the case. Also, let's get this straight right out of the gate. Wow, that rhymed. I'm Dr. Seuss. I did not hate the Marvels because I don't like women in powerful roles in movies or anything like that. It's simply just a really messy, bad, poorly put together film that just happens to star female actresses in the forefront. So please understand that my criticism of it is coming from a place of being a fan of well-made movies and not from a place of bigotry or hatred. Finally, just a heads up that there are going to be some spoilers in this review, but I honestly do not think that it matters for this movie because the story is really weak and paper thin to begin with. Alright, now that I've cleared all of that up, I'm going to briefly get into the positives I had for this movie. I thought that the character of Kamala Khan, Ms. Marvel, was done alright, and the action sequences were cool, and I think that's literally like it for the positives. Is there anything else? Oh yeah, it was short, so I mean, I guess at least they showed us mercy in that way. And the film doesn't really feel super boring because there's constantly something happening all the time, even though we don't really know exactly what is going on and the movie's not super clear about how we got there or what's really going on. But yeah, I guess it's not a chore to sit through for those two reasons. Yeah. Now let's get into what didn't work with this movie. To be quite frank with you all, if The Marvels was an essay that I turned in for one of my college classes, I would have received an F for my work. It's really hard for me to describe just how bad this film is on most fronts, but let me try to start with the biggest offender, which is the story is so fast-paced and empty and jumbled that it's really hard to follow and even understand what the heck is going on in the movie. And it's not like one of those really complicated plots for a good movie that's confusing because of how many different intricate layers and twists there are. It's super confusing because there are no good transitions between scenes. We'll be at one location, jump to another, then rapidly skip to another, only to cut back to the second location, but now new characters are there that we didn't see nor set up how they got there, only to cut back to the third location where now all the characters are there somehow, and then to go back to the first one, but then there's like one of the characters there but the other ones aren't. And then, yeah, that's like literally basically how it feels, trying to keep up with this movie. This story, being more confusing than the Five Nights at Freddy's lore, actually makes sense though when you think about it, because of all the reshoots, re-edits, and people like the movie's own director leaving in the middle of post-production. It really seems like whatever this movie was supposed to be when the project first started got completely scrapped, gutted for parts that they thought were good, reshot, and then rewrote parts that they think didn't work, and then rinsed and repeated that process about 6 more times. Any movie that had to go through a production hell like this would probably turn out to be a completely illogical, jumbled mess like this movie turned out to be. You can only reshoot and rewrite and remake so many times before you start to confuse yourself and forget what you were even trying to make in the first place. Speaking of all these reshoots, that is again the most likely explanation for the second biggest flaw in this film, which was the wild tone inconsistency. The Marvels had no clear direction and no idea what type of movie it wanted to be. There were super dark moments like when hundreds of thousands of Skrulls die, when the bad guy steals like the air from their planet, but then 5 minutes later we're on a silly planet singing songs and having childish dances. Or 1 minute the gang will be doing jump rope on the ship and having a funny silly montage, and then a few minutes later another planet will get completely annihilated and tons of innocent people will die. A consistent tone is non-existent in this film, and it makes it hard to know what you're supposed to feel throughout the movie. But you know what? A wonky, non-understandable story, messy tone, as long as there's characters who are compelling. Let me stop you right there and shoot that one down before you even fire it off. The only decent character that gets any sort of mildly significant development is Kamala Khan. or Ms. Marvel. Captain Marvel and Rambo have this like weird beef because Rambo was mad that Captain Marvel took too long to come back to visit her, which just really makes her seem like really immature and childish.
Oh, boo-hoo! Let me play a sad song for you on the world's smallest violin.
It's just such a forced, contrived issue that literally does nothing overall to their relationship in the film. And you know what, since we're on the subject of characters and are talking about Captain Rambo right now, let me just go ahead and say it. Teyonah Parris's, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, her performance in this film was shockingly awful. And I don't say that because I think she's a bad actress, but I do think that by the time the production team called her up for the fourth or fifth, or maybe it was even the sixth time, you know, right? Like maybe it was the sixth time that broke her, asking her to come back to do reshoots, I think she just stopped caring about the film, like most people who were working on it at that point, and it definitely shows. Brie Larson too, she was really bad in this film. Samuel L. Jackson is a great actor, but was given a dog water script that even he couldn't save. Fury is relegated to basically a non-important, information-providing comic relief character in the film, who hardly does anything of significance throughout the entire runtime. And the villain, whose name I honestly do not remember, and I assure you that it would not be worth my time looking up, she is, I think, like literally the worst villain in MCU history. Her motivation could have been strong, but it's all conveyed through dialogue and we don't hardly see any of it, making it vastly less compelling. Her character is non-existent, she has no personality or interesting traits, and she isn't even the biggest threat to the Marvels in this movie. She is not that powerful and basically gets bailed out by the magic plot device that keeps the character switching places whenever they use her powers. She's just awful all around, even by MCU standards. Alright, I'm gonna fire off some rapid fire critiques here and then get to my conclusion and get you all out of this video. So here we go. The CGI was on par for most Phase 5 projects, which means that it was complete cheeks and looked goofy for the most part. This might have been the Marvel movie that I laughed the least at, and I can understand that I was not the target demographic for this film, but that's still pretty bad if I cannot remember a single joke landing in the entirety of this film. There are some scenes that feel completely off from the rest of the movie and are just jarring to watch. There are numerous plot holes with this film, like for example the characters can't use their powers at the same time without switching places, but then the film conveniently ignores that when it wants to, and there are several times where multiple characters are using their powers at the same time and don't switch. Captain Marvel is extremely nerfed, like a Super Smash Bros. Ultimate update, because the villains are way too weak, and if she was even a fraction as strong as she was in Endgame or her last movie, she could have easily defeated them all. Emotional beats and moments do not work in this movie at all because the breakneck speed it moves at, and the fact that practically every single character receives no meaningful development throughout the entire movie just like makes it impossible for there to be any real emotional impact in any of these moments. And in summary, all of that brings me to the current state of the MCU. In my humble opinion, The Marvels was either the worst or second worst movie from the MCU I have ever seen. And it's not just the fact that this movie is critically a failure, but it's the fact that they released this movie in this condition. It just shows an utter disregard for their fans. They have a completely messy, inconsistent, clearly not finished film, and rather than canceling it or scrapping it or maybe even trying to make it work somehow and like re-edit it, they just release it in a messy state. They're serving you slop, and they expect you to eat it just because it's a Marvel movie, and loyal fans are going to watch every single one. The fan base deserves better than this. The character of Captain Marvel deserves better than this. And to settle for this clearly heavily flawed movie would be a disservice to the paying customer and to the franchise of Marvel itself. Fans of the Golden Age are slowly realizing that this isn't the MCU they grew to love, and the box office numbers reflect that. The last few Marvel projects have, for the most part, done poorly in the box office, and this movie looks to be the worst one by far. It's projected to make less than 60 million in its opening weekend, which would only be slightly better than the 2008 Incredible Hulk movie. Like, that's how bad this is, dude. Like, that's the level that we are at here. It is almost guaranteed at this point that Marvel is going to lose hundreds of millions of dollars on this flop, as the Marvels will probably be one of the worst bombs movies at the box office this year. And I think this is very telling. Marvel has been on a decline as a franchise, they've been losing in the boxing match, and I think this was the knockout blow. The Marvels, in my opinion, really seems like the last straw, the kill shot to the MCU, and I honestly think that it should be. The MCU deserves to come to an end after all it has been through. Marvel is not making money anymore. The fans don't care about the movies anymore. They are not returning to the legendary heights they had back in the day. It's over, and there should be no shame in that. Let this story end. Please, because if you keep dragging it out like this, the only thing you will continue to do is drain your own pockets and ruin iconic characters and franchises that people once loved. The time to milk this franchise has come to an end. It's over. And if you needed any further proof of that being the case, then look no further than the Marvels. A project that was so bad, it might finally make the fans sever their ties with the studio for good. With the collapse of the MCU taking place, it is paving a way for a new genre to dominate the industry. And if you want to hear about what genre is up next, and stay tuned for all my future uploads, then make sure to leave a like and subscribe and turn on that bell. Anyways, I'll catch you all on the next one. Have a great day.